giving you a general breakdown of Ball State all week, but now it's time to get into the nitty-gritty with a man who knows way more than I do about the team. That's why we're bringing him in, the expert from Ball State. That is Robby General, Ball State beat writer for the Star Press here on the BWI Daily Edition. Robby, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So, Ball State travels to Beaver Stadium this Saturday, 3:30 kickoff. One of the things I want to start with something interesting that I saw that you posted online after the game last week and I'm going to quote you here. Ball State didn't play up to its own standard in a 31-21 victory over Western Illinois. Tell me why that was the lead into your story after the game.
Yeah, so I think, anyone who watched it that first half, obviously, you go in tied 7-7 against an FCS team in Western Illinois. Wasn't your best half of play, and they started to pick things up in the second half a little bit. But still, at the end of the day, this team, they bring back so many guys from last year's MAC championship team, and they bring back all those guys with high expectations, right? You don't bring back 16 super seniors to win a bunch of close games or to just, go 6-6 and make a bowl game. They want to repeat as MAC champions this year. So they were disappointed themselves, and it wasn't like a bad game by any stretch. And we saw a lot worse games happen in week one, certainly across the FBS. I think the big message at the end was like, hey, a win's a win, and that's true. But I think Ball State, they know that they can play on another level, and they've proven that. Last year they had several games where, like the bowl game, for example, they just played lights out on defense, and so they've proven that they can play to another level. And from my perspective, I've been either covering or watching Ball State since 2014. I obviously went to school there, and I think in years past, maybe a 10-point win would be like, hoorah, like we won, like it doesn't even matter like who we're playing. So I think it's a good sign that, they're not satisfied with a 10-point victory. So I think that was more of the message.
Would you say they were rusty in week one? Because when I was watching the game and then when I watched the film back later, it seemed like they're a really well-coached, disciplined team. You mentioned 16 super seniors, so really veteran, good football players, but there seemed to be a lot of unforced errors and sort of, mental mistakes. Is that fair to say? And is that how you saw that game?
Yeah, they just seemed like, for lack of a better term, they just seemed off to me, right? I think there was a couple drop balls here and there, which you'd never like to see. Drew Plitt missed a couple receivers down the field, and the offense just really never could get anything going. It was like, all right, Ball State's got the ball back. All right, they're punting again. And it just kept going like that over and over in the first half. And then the second half, they came out, they established the run, which was key. And that just opened up a whole bunch of options. And they run a committee type in the backfield. And once they started pounding the ball on the ground, that opened up some of their receivers for some quick outs. And then they drove down the field twice and scored twice, right? Coming out in the second half. So I don't know if it was rust. I don't think it was nerves. They just look kind of off, and I think it took them a while to get going. But I think you also kind of see that in week one, where there's not many teams that come out and are firing in all cylinders. Maybe outside of Alabama, but but yeah. So it took them some time, but at the end of the day, they got the job done. So.
Yeah, every time you're like, okay, so that was, Penn State played Wisconsin week one. It was 0-0 at halftime. Wisconsin was doing sort of the same thing, a lot of unforced errors. Then you watch Alabama, and you're like, oh, okay, so there's a different level here. But that Ball State first half versus the second half, clearly they came out in the second half and made some adjustments and were on their way to victory. They received, again, you're reporting, they received AP top 25 votes. And I know that, the polls are kind of a perception thing. They don't necessarily mean a whole lot now anyway. But I guess in general, is that a fair assessment of what you think this Ball State team is as far as they can be a ranked team this year when all is said and done? Or is it, kind of the perception of what they did last year, MAC championship, bringing back as much talent as they did? Where do you land on that kind of thought about where they belong in the large picture of college football?
Yeah, I think right now they're kind of in a fair spot. Kind of on the outside looking in. They haven't had. I mean, obviously, week one didn't instill a bunch of. I mean, even if they blew out Western Illinois, I don't think that it would have changed like AP voters' minds, right?
Right.
But I mean, since they returned so much from last year, and they played really well last year at the end. They beat a ranked Buffalo team. They beat a ranked San Jose State team, and really beat them in that bowl game. So yeah, I think they're kind of right now on the outside looking in and just kind of looking for some of those non-conference wins to kind of push them over. I think last year was kind of hard to perceive them just playing MAC teams. And then once they played San Jose State, and did what they did, they finally kind of got some of that recognition and were ranked for the first time at the end of the season. So I think bring it back. I think that's what they expect out of themselves, to be a ranked team, kind of right around that 20 range. And I mean, we'll see what happens. They don't have the easiest non-conference schedule, but if they could roll out of here, going 3-1 with maybe wins at Wyoming and Army, who are also kind of right in that range too. I think that gives them a little bit more clout, kind of moving forward into the conference schedule.
Let's talk about Drew Plitt. Let's get into some of the players that I think stood out when you watched the game. He seems like a really in command of the offense. What sort of player is he at the quarterback position?
Yeah, I mean, he's super comfortable where he's at now. I think this is now year 3 as the full time starter for him. So he's obviously seen it all before. He's seen the down years that Ball State had, and he stuck with it. And now he's kind of reaping some of the rewards, right? So he's just a very kind of consistent, poised quarterback. I think at the beginning of last year, obviously made a mistake in that Miami game, which led to a loss. But he doesn't really put you in a lot of losing positions, and he's not like a scrambling quarterback either. He's more of a pocket passer, but he's not afraid to get out of the pocket and run for 10 yards. If he sees, I mean, if everyone's dropping, and we saw it a couple times last week, we saw it last year. If the defense is dropping back, he's not afraid to take the ball and run. And he had a couple rushing touchdowns last year too. So yeah, he's just a veteran guy, super poised, super comfortable in his spot, and I think the team responds to him really well. And I was out of practice today, and for maybe as off as he looked in the first half of last week, today he was right back, hitting everything, people in his face. So super poised, a good leader for this team, and a big reason why they've been having so much success.
Seems like a guy that makes the right decision with the football, aware of what's going on situationally, and can deliver the football accurately. Especially, I was impressed with their quick game, their underneath stuff. They were able to get into that soft part of the zone and get some catch and runs. Leads me to a guy that I was very impressed with and that I thought was a standout in Justin Hall, the receiver for Ball State. Tell me a little bit about him, his story, where he came from, and what you think about Justin Hall.
Yeah, I think Justin Hall is just like, I think when you think of Ball State's offense, it kind of starts and ends with him, right? He's the guy who gets everyone going. He's the big playmaker. He was a part of that group. When Mike New first came over, that came out of Georgia. They grabbed a lot of guys. They started recruiting heavily out of Georgia, and he immediately shined as soon as he put on a jersey. I think he's the leader in the FBS in receptions, active right now. He's Ball State's all-time reception leader, and last week he moved up to 3rd in receiving yards, right? But he's not just a guy that can play receiver. They're not afraid to use him as kind of a jet sweep type of guy and running motion and stuff like that. They use him all over the field. He returns kicks, he returns punts. He's a little undersized, so he gets kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit, but he's got the speed to make up for it. And if he gets behind the secondary, watch out, because he's the type of guy who can turn on the burners and hit those home run type of plays.
He also seems to have a good rapport with Plitt as far as their connection down the field. A couple good back shoulder throws. Seems like they're really in sync. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, they've been playing together for a couple of years, and you can see their comfortability, whether it's in practice or out on game days, right? They're super comfortable with each other, and I think there's a lot of guys on this team that have kind of established that rapport. But I think Plitt and Hall is kind of that number one who have both been together for multiple years and starting for multiple years, and they've both been a huge part of the offense for the past couple seasons.
Ball State is coming to Beaver Stadium, 3:30 kickoff. It's a near sellout this Saturday, and we're talking with Robby General, the Star Press, to get a better idea of who is coming in to Beaver Stadium. This is a team that feels, when I watch them, they feel super confident, despite the fact they were little off. Would you say that this is a very confident team?
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw it out of practice today. They take themselves serious, but not like overly serious. They have a bunch of veteran guys. They know what they're doing. Defensively, they're now in year 2 of Tyler Stockton's system, so they're more comfortable with what they're doing. And their big focus is just kind of flying around and making the plays now, right? They're not thinking about what they're doing as much as opposed to just going out and doing it. But yeah, they're super comfortable, super confident, and I think that just comes with like a lot of teams across the country that return a bunch of guys. I think that just comes with that veteran leadership that they've kind of built up over the years, and I think experiencing some success last year did not hurt that one bit either.
Tell me about the offensive line. Seems like a unit that works well together.
Yeah, this is a veteran offensive line too. Pull up the depth chart.
I was going to say they acted like it. I was really impressed with the way they worked together. So I was assuming, I didn't take a look, but I assume they were all pretty veteran, right?
Yeah, all of them. 4 out of the 5 are starters from last year. They're right tackle from last year, Joseph Boggs. Mike New said earlier this week he had a shoulder injury and he was in a sleeve today, so I'm assuming he's going to be out for a couple weeks. But Damon Kaler and Corey Stewart did a good job protecting that right side. But when you look at this lineup, you got Caleb Slavin, who's a 5th-year guy who's been starting really since he was a freshman. He came right in. He's actually a local guy here in the Muncie area and came right in and showed why they recruited him. Jalen Turner, Curtis Blackwell, who I think was an Outland Trophy watch list guy, Anthony Todd, who's coming back for another year as a starter. And so yeah, it's just a real veteran group, and they're another group that's kind of comfortable with each other and have been through the ups and downs, and they're just embracing kind of being a different team than they were as freshmen. When the way they describe it as a kind of broken culture back in those 2-10 seasons and those 50 and 60 point losses. And I think they're just having a great time, being the hunted as opposed to the hunters in a sense.
You mentioned there's a timeshare in the backfield, and that when they were able to get the running game established, helped their passing game in the second half last week. Are there any guys outside of Justin Hall to be aware of that you think can have and make a difference on Saturday?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Will Jones, he's a redshirt senior. He's another local guy from kind of the greater Indianapolis area. But he had a career high, I believe, last week. 94 yards, and that's because Ty Evans, who's kind of their bruiser type back, has been out all fall camp, and he wasn't practicing today, so I would doubt that he would be playing on Saturday. But then, they go down. They got a speedy guy in Donnie Marcus who can make things happen. And I think he could have had a better day had a ball not floated over his head on a screen. And then the true freshman, Carson Steele, who's Indiana Mr. Football from last year. The dude he doesn't look like a freshman. Sometimes it takes freshmen to kind of build into their bodies. And I'm actually going to write a story on him tonight. He just looks like a college athlete. And he came out last week. I think it was like 7 rushes for 70-something yards and a 37-yard touchdown right up the middle. And I think he's going to be a guy that in Carson Steele, I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be a familiar name sooner rather than later here. And he stepped into his first college game. I think his first carry was a 4th and 1. So talk about a fun situation to go into, having to pick up a first down. But he got it done. Super impressive. So, they can just sub guys in and out. And I think there are other receivers too. Johan Tyler is a bigger guy, 6'3", who's more of like the NFL type build, I guess. And then Ja'Shawn Jackson, who had a couple catches last week. He's a Cincinnati transfer. I think it's only a matter of time before he kind of starts breaking out and has some better games. So across the board, it's kind of crazy to look at and see all the weapons they do have, and they're not afraid to rotate guys in and out offensively or defensively.
Robby, something interesting you said a little bit earlier, that actually surprised me. You said this is the second year they've been in a new defensive scheme, right?
Mhm.
That secondary, though, how long have they been playing together? Because they seem like a unit that communicates well and a lot of really smart players. Is that another veteran part of the 16 super seniors that came back?
Yeah, yeah, and the safeties, Brett Anderson, and Bryce Cosby have been there, and Cosby's kind of the hint between him and Brandon Martin. I mean, they're the leaders of that defense through and through. Ameche Uzodinma, and then you get JT Wahi back. He was a first-year grad transfer from Norfolk State. So yeah, I mean, they've been super comfortable with each other. And then when Wahi's not in there or Uzodinma's not in there, they just kind of sub in Nick Jones, who got an interception last week too. So that secondary, they're super confident and. It's funny. I was listening to the broadcast of the Penn State game, and they kept talking about that bend don't break defense, right? And I think that secondary really takes the Ball State secondary really takes pride in that. Whereas, I mean, you look on paper, they give up a lot of yardage, but when push comes to shove, they find a way to make plays. Like last week, I think Western Illinois was 3 for 13 on third down, despite Ball State giving up close to 450 yards. I think you'll take that exchange, giving up 450 yards. Maybe not some of the bigger plays like the 75-yard touchdown pass they had. But yeah, they definitely have that bend don't break mentality, and they definitely tighten up when it gets into the red zone as well.
Tell me a little more about Bryce Cosby. I love a good Sam linebacker slot safety hybrid. The guy that literally you don't have a good classification for him other than he's a good football player. He kind of stood out to me in the versatility of how he was used. How has he grown into that role?
Yeah, it's so crazy. I mean, Bryce is a guy who's really, I mean, he is like, I think the veteran presence. I think across the board. Every Monday they have a podcast with the Ball State Sport or Athletics group, and it's head coach Mike New and it's Bryce Cosby right next to him, and I think there's a reason for that. He's a leader, and you can just kind of hear it in his voice, and you can see it kind of out in the field. And he's another guy he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he just goes out and finds a way to make plays and puts guys in the right position. And I mean, he's been a veteran presence on this defense, and he's one of those guys, that at the beginning when they were talking about bringing everyone back, he was one of the voices who's like, let's do this, let's get it going. He was the one who started that Detroit or bust mantra last year, and even after their first week loss, never kind of strayed away from it. And then Ball State ended up going to Detroit and winning their first MAC championship in 20 plus years and win their first bowl game. So yeah, he's probably one of the biggest presence, if not the biggest presence, I would say, on either side of the field.
Another guy that stood out to me, it's interesting that you referenced him the way you did. Nick Jones, I know he got the interception, but seems like a guy that knows how to keep his eyes on the quarterback, how to play his zone really well. What's his role in the defense, and I guess what sort of impact does he have for Ball State?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's another one of those guys, and I think this whole secondary is a bunch of guys that they're super athletic. I think they're more confident this year coming in. I think the most interesting thing in practice, and Bryce was kind of one of the leaders in this, but all the cornerbacks did it. They would jaw back and forth with the receivers, and it'd get kind of chippy at times, but you love to see that type of thing. And Nick Jones is one of those guys, just like all these other guys in the secondary that could make that play, that can force that turnover and keep up with whatever receiver you kind of put on him and be confident doing it. And whether he's starting or not, a guy who's more than comfortable going out there and filling whatever role man or zone is needed.
Another veteran secondary that Penn State is going up against. Last week, Wisconsin had, I think, 3 super seniors and 2 seniors. So it's not going to get any easier for Penn State with more veterans and more players that have been playing football for a long time at the college football level. The defensive front, give me your impressions of that group and what you think about them.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing about them is, you obviously got your starters on the depth chart, but these guys rotate through 9 or 10 guys. And you saw that early in the Western Illinois game where, you got 3 down linemen and they only play with 3 down linemen, right? So you got 3 of them out there, maybe a play or two, pull them out, put 3 more in, and they're just a nuisance, Tavion Woodard was obviously the guy who got back-to-back sacks at an important time last week. But, Chris Adjuman, Justin Ramsey, Jack Soppe, Kyron Mims, John Harris, And there's Jordan Ward, who's a graduate transfer, who's coming in. They have so many different guys. And Coach Keith McKenzie, he's not afraid to put them all out there. And I think that shows on the tape. And I think that kind of throws a weird perception on them where, they had all MAC players across the board except for their defensive line last year. Yeah. But that's just because they're not afraid to use them. And I think the defensive line is comfortable enough with themselves to be like, we don't really care who's doing the job as long as we're getting the job done. And I think last week, especially in stopping the run, they showed how much of a force they can bring, for sure.
I was super interested to see how they lined up too, because they're not just your traditional 3 down front. They do some more complex things with their alignment. Penn State struggled to run the ball last week, but when they were able to get some drives going, they used a no huddle to kind of put the pressure on Wisconsin. Do you think in that situation, wanting to rotate, do you think that front 7 can hold up if they have to play a couple of plays in a row, and if Penn State does able to hit one of those and get their hurry-up offense going?
Yeah, I think, in that case, obviously you can't run guys off the field and back on, but I think this defensive line, they're pretty big size-wise, but they have enough athleticism, and if you need to run some of those more athletic guys and bring in maybe some of the outside linebackers, I don't think there's a problem with Ball State doing that, but it would be interesting to see because Western Illinois didn't run a lot of up-tempo last week, and I know Ball State offensively did. So seeing them respond to that would certainly be interesting. And just because they try to stay as fresh as they can, and I'd be interested to see how that's going to play out over 4 quarters, just depending on who's on the field. When Penn State trying to run up tempo and stuff like that.
So, Robby, what do you think? Do you think that because I think really the defense to me, with the way they play as a unit from the back 7 and the way they're able to play, I think a good coverage scheme, some complex stuff, and that front 7, do you think that Ball State's defense can frustrate Penn State and Sean Clifford enough to keep this game within scoring distance for Nick Jones? For Justin Hall in the offense?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really going to come down to, and I think the biggest focus this week was, not letting up those big plays. And, that's obviously what hurt Wisconsin last week too, right? A couple big plays, set up Penn State to win that game. So it's going to be about limiting those, and they don't seem too concerned. And I think that's just another one of those kind of week 1 jitter type things and trying to figure things out. I'm more so, not so much like the big plays that they can't stop them, but I'm wondering how, the lack of communication, having to go to nonverbal communication, just because these guys have played in front of big crowds, but they've never played in front of 100,000 plus. So, you always wonder if, a breakdown, and it could only be one that leads to like a 60-yard touchdown or something like that. So that would be my main concern, but I think they have the athleticism to cause some issues. And I think they have enough guys that can force some turnovers. And I think at the end of the day, you're going to need that defense to force a turnover too, and to give you the advantage to get the ball back in Ball State's hands if they want to pull out the upset here.
Just one last question. What do you think about Penn State? What stood out to you if you got a chance to watch them in week 1?
Yeah, I think the first thing right off the bat, just watching that Wisconsin game, is just their pass rush. It was relentless, early on. And I think I tweeted out something to the fact that, Ball State's offensive line, they're going to have their hands full, trying to keep those guys at bay. And I think that bend don't break mentality, and maybe you got a couple lucky breaks at Penn State did in the red zone, a couple fumbles by Wisconsin. But, you don't often see, a team hold another team to 1 for 4 in the red zone. That's really impressive. So I think the biggest thing that stood out for me, at least looking at Ball State's side, is, trying to give Drew Plitt enough time or opening enough holes to establish their own game, to give Drew Plitt enough time to pass the ball and find a way to stop that pass rush, because, they truly were relentless, especially in the first half last week.
Robby General of the Star Press, he's joining us today. Are you going to be at the game?
I will be, yeah. So I'm pulling double duty at the paper here, so I'll be covering a high school game Friday night, writing up that, and then taking a quick cat nap at the office and driving 7.5 hours out to Pennsylvania. So it's going to be a long drive, but I'll stop by a gas station, get some energy drinks, and be right on my way. So.
Well, I hope you enjoy your trip to Happy Valley. We're happy to have you, and hope you have a good time at Beaver Stadium on Saturday. Thanks for joining us today in the BWI Daily Edition.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to my first trip out to Penn State for sure.
Should be a good time. 3:30 is the kickoff. And don't forget, we're going to have BWI live here on YouTube postgame, a live postgame show after the game. 20 minutes post-final whistle. We'll be giving you analysis and breakdown of what happened. I'll be giving you the X's and O's and the larger story of whatever happens between Penn State and Ball State. And don't forget, coming up tomorrow, Ryan Snyder and Ryan Snyder's best bets along with recruiting on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We'll be back tomorrow.